The waiting is almost over. Tomorrow, the king in the north becomes the king in the south, east and west as well. To stretch the Game of Thrones metaphor to breaking point, his enemies are already warning winter is coming. Keir Starmer said so long farewell to number 10. He says he won't make trouble for his successor. He's probably the only Labour backbencher who won't. Burnham's Manchester fans say that after 2 years of Morrissey-style misery from Keir, tomorrow is Andy's Happy Monday. First order of business, what the previous guys left behind. Boris Johnson's legacy, Brexit, migration and Ukraine. We'll bring you an exclusive extended interview with the former Prime Minister in just a few moments. And hear from the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, Lucy Powell, plus our panel throughout the show. Welcome to Sunday Morning with Trevor Phillips. Without wanting to be rude, I do wonder if all the talk of coronations recently has Team Burnham a little overexcited. On Friday, the Prime Minister presumptive claimed that his ascent to the leadership of the Labour Party was the most significant change moment in politics for 40 years. Well, that's a big claim, even if you limit yourself to British politics and the actions of our own government. Does he have something planned that is more significant than privatisation, the sell-off of council houses, or trades union reform under Margaret Thatcher? More significant than the minimum wage, creation of the Scottish and Welsh parliaments, or the Macpherson report under Tony Blair? More significant than financial austerity and Brexit under David Cameron? Well, if that's what we're in for tomorrow, better buckle up. It's going to be a wild ride. But so far, we haven't heard anything that points to radicalism on that scale. Mr. Burnham needs to be careful about the expectations he's setting. In case you hadn't heard this, the new Prime Minister's from the north of England, where they have a rich range of expressions for those who disappoint the voters. Most of them, for example, the one involving wind and waste liquids, I can't use at this time of the morning, but every Mancunian knows the expression, all mouth and trousers. They did say, and trousers, not no trousers up there. Well, anyway, he won't want to hear that one being chanted down the Oxford Road. Boris Johnson left office almost 4 years ago, not due to an election loss, but because his cabinet and parliamentary party lost confidence in him. A couple of years earlier, he won a big majority. He wasn't best pleased about being forced out as Prime Minister. Sound a bit familiar? Well, this weekend, Keir Starmer is out, and tomorrow, Andy Burnham becomes Prime Minister. So we spoke exclusively to Boris Johnson to look at how his legacy still has a big impact on the country and its leaders today, and for his advice to the new guy. A warning that there is some relatively strong language in a couple of places in this interview. Boris Johnson, we'll have a new Prime Minister installed this week. It's the fourth since you left office. Now, it strikes me that all your successors have had to deal in some way with your legacy, Ukraine, migration, Brexit. So let's take them one by one. What do you want to hear from Andy Burnham on Ukraine?
I want to hear that the UK government will not only stick with Ukraine, but will be even more resolute in support of Ukraine. Now, the problem we've got at the moment is that it sort of feels like the Ukrainians are doing better. And their drone technology, their bravery, they're scoring fantastic successes against the Russians. And by some counts, they're killing more Russians than Putin can recruit. They're killing 30,000 a month or whatever. And so there's in the Western media everywhere, there's a great deal of excitement about Ukraine's prospects. And I've got no doubt they are going to win.
You've been there in the not so recent past.
Yes, I have. I did I went to do an article for the Daily Mail, and they brilliantly took. I was sort of being taken by some fantastic male journalists who kind of, Sherpa'd me like a sort of, incompetent alpinist up the mountain, and they showed me the front line. They showed me this so-called kill zone. And I have a real sense of what's going on. There's a film coming out about it. But what I really take away from it is that the Ukrainians are still under huge pressure. They have a big recruitment problem. The suffering of those people in those trenches, which I saw, which I think the Mail film will explain, it's terrible. And what we need to do, and so you ask about the new UK government or Andy Burnham or whatever, what we've got to do is get this thing over. And one of the reasons it isn't over is that Putin doesn't really know from the West what we want. And we won't declare that we really want Ukraine as part of the Western Committee of Nations, so a group of countries. So NATO, for instance, is the crucial thing. And as long as Putin thinks that there's that ambiguity, that's the fatal thing about Ukraine. So it's the doubt about the ultimate location of Ukraine in the security architecture of the world. And as long as Putin still thinks there's a chance he can keep Ukraine ambiguous, he'll keep attacking. So one of the ways to get the war over is for Washington, London, Paris, but everywhere to declare, again, what used to be the policy, which is that Ukraine should join NATO. Now, you don't hear that.
So you want the Western nations to say tomorrow that Ukraine should first of all be part of the NATO alliance. You know Putin. How Putin will respond to that.
Yeah, Putin will respond to that by doing a deal, because at the moment he has no reason to think that we're serious, and he will keep wanting to push Ukraine, keep wanting to carve Ukraine up until he hears that it's game over and that there's a long-term strategic objective by the West to have Ukraine as part of our group of nations.
Why would he take that declaration seriously?
That used to be.
Why would he take that declaration seriously? Because what you're really saying is that Starmer, Macron, Merz essentially haven't been as aggressive or strong or as supportive as they ought to have been.
I think we've made a mistake in not being clear about the final status of Ukraine, because I don't think that Putin will desist until he thinks it's really game over. We should do several other things, by the way, to support Ukraine. We could do much more with the Shadow Fleet.
Before you go on to that,
we don't do enough of that in the English Channel. We could do much more to fund Ukraine. There's about $15 billion worth of Putin's assets just in London.
But before you go on to that,
and we could unfreeze that and give that to Ukraine.
It's a very interesting proposition, because I haven't heard this before, that you're saying...
We used to hear it about 3.5 years ago.
When you were in office.
It's
one of the things that's changed since 3.5 years ago is Donald Trump. Are you saying that Trump, as well, has been weak, fallen down on the job, failed to press home the advantage that he should have had?
I mean, I make no secret of that. I think that it would be a very powerful thing. I've said this to President Trump. It'd be a very powerful thing if the United States declared that it was a strategic objective of the United States for Ukraine to be free, sovereign, and independent country. Number one, you don't hear that much from Washington, right? And number two, that Ukraine should be part of NATO.
And what did he say to you when you said that to him?
Well, I mean, he's very good at listening. He's very good at listening. That used to be the policy, and it's not the policy. And I think it's a mistake. And I think it's one of the reasons this thing has dragged on, and is at risk of dragging on even further. Get it clear. What have we got to lose? You couldn't say Putin's going to escalate. I mean, how much more escalation can he do? You know,
So-
he's bombing apartment blocks. He's trying to recruit as many people as he can. He's in a desperate hole. Escalation isn't the problem. What needs to happen is we need to flip the switch in his mind and convince him that geostrategically it's game over. He's tried. He's got to defend it now to his people, but he's got to end it.
Let me ask you this. You spent a lot of time with Ukrainians. Zelensky clearly trusts you, and I think you're still in contact. Do you think he has felt betrayed by the West, and particularly by the Americans?
No, I don't think that. I don't think that at all. I think that he's occasionally very frustrated by some of the things that I've mentioned, the failure to sort out the shadow fleet, the failure to pony up the frozen assets, the failure to declare the long-term objective. But look, you talk to, I'm sure I know you do, you talk to those Ukrainian generals, they would not survive, they couldn't keep going for an hour in their fighting in the Donbass without American technical support and American intelligence. It's fantastically important, and with a few hiccups, it has kept going throughout the Trump period. And, you know, I think that paradoxically, you know, Trump could be the guy ready to put the hard word on Putin and get this thing done. And there's no doubt that when it comes to foreign policy initiatives, this is a guy who's willing to do some pretty tough things, right? Nobody thought he's the first American president to use violence against Iran, right? You know, whatever you think about about his logic and how that's worked out, he is. I think he is the guy. And I've said this to him, and I said this repeatedly. I think paradoxically, although I think that his instincts on Ukraine haven't always, or his language about Ukraine hasn't always been, you know, put it mildly, on, you know, totally on all fours with what I think. I think he really could fix it, and that's what I've always told him.
Let's talk about another part of your legacy, Brexit. It's 10 years since the referendum. The Bank of England says that a Conservative estimate shows that the United Kingdom economy is now 6% smaller than it would have been without Brexit. And that's let me finish. That would be easily enough to hand our friends in Ukraine several $100 million worth of support, and also meet our defence commitment. Are you yet ready to admit that this was a mistake?
No, not at all. I think that if the UK economy might have grown more, then it would have been by far the fastest growing economy in Europe. It would have been quite...
And wouldn't that have been great?
And so I don't think that is true. I think what has damaged the UK economy, as I think the Bank of England has repeatedly confirmed since 2024, when actually the outgoing Conservative government had got inflation down, got interest rates down, got taxation down as much as we could. The problem is that you've had a Labour government that has been absolutely remorseless.
Oh no! Come on!
Absolutely remorseless.
They're saying this is over the 10-year period.
Yeah, but if you look at the real period,
all of the bad stuff happened since 2024.
When did people really start fleeing this country? When did you start to see the wealth creators leaving this country in huge numbers? It's because of...
That's deflection.
It's not
over
deflection.
The 10 years, we didn't do any... We didn't improve our productivity.
In that case...
We didn't shrink the debt. Actually, some of that is on your watch.
Yeah, sorry. On my watch, let's not forget that for much of that 10 years, we didn't actually deliver Brexit at all. Okay? What happened then... shortly after we legally came out of the European Union and took back control of our economy and our laws, we had COVID. And actually, as I never tire of saying, but I will repeat because I probably haven't told you, Trevor, what actually happened was that thanks to Brexit, during that fateful year of 2021, when we had the vaccine rollout and we were trying to come out of the COVID restrictions, which was catastrophic for the economy. You talk about the economy. That was the biggest problem. How could you have any economic growth when you were closing the whole economy because of a disease, right? And it was because we had the freedom Wait, let me just finish this point. Because
Okay.
because we had the freedom to roll out AstraZeneca and Moderna and Pfizer and all these vaccines literally weeks, if not months faster than our closest competitors, the result was we had vaccinated 45% of the UK. I'm going to repeat this because you've asked. 45% of the UK population and 100% of the vulnerable people by March 2021.
I'm happy to let you...
And the result was thanks to Brexit. You've been blaming Brexit.
I am happy to let you make the case. But I have heard that case. But I've asked you
about... Let me repeat it.
I've asked you about the economy. And the point I'm
telling you about the economy. We came out of COVID restrictions so fast. We had the fastest economic rebound in Europe, right?
Okay.
And that was thanks to Brexit.
And we would have grown faster without Brexit.
No, because we would have been unable to vaccinate our population as fast as we did, right? Okay, and so we would have been stuck behind with the rest. As don't forget, most other European countries, including France, including Germany, did not come out of COVID restrictions for 9 months after we did, right? Now that's a big economic disadvantage for them. A big Brexit advantage for us.
We could spend a great deal of time discussing why that is, but I want to move on to...
We could, but I don't think we'd come to a separate conclusion, because that is the answer.
On immigration...
And the problem with Brexit, obviously I love Brexit. Je suis Brexit. Voila. You're never going to...
I know I'm going to shift your opinion.
What I do think about it is, Brexit is a tool, right? And you either use it or you don't.
And do you think we failed to use it properly?
I think that I think that it's starting to happen. And I think even Labour is actually interested in doing things differently. If you look at their approach to AI, it's different from the European approach on biosciences. We're now starting to diverge, in spite of some of the difficulties that they're making. So,
okay.
I think give it time.
Migration.
Yes?
Whoever turns out to be Andy Burnham's Home Secretary is going to have to deal with the consequences, which are both practical and political, of decisions that you took to open the doors to what in the end became a wave of net migration of knocking on 1 million. What people now call the Boris wave, and the consequence has been a surge. Let me finish the question so you can answer the question.
It's nonsense. It's nonsense. This has
been a surge for Nigel Farage. Was that a mistake?
First of all, the Reform Party, I can't remember whether they were even called that. Yeah, I think they were.
They were.
Yeah, they were on about 0% when I was Prime Minister, right? Okay? Even when I resigned, but they were on 0%.
We hadn't had the Boris wave yet when you were Prime Minister. We had the decisions, but we hadn't had the people arriving.
Sorry, that's nonsense. Then in that case, it was nothing to do with me, because
the decision you took, which was to allow people to bring dependents and so on. The consequence
what happened?
In 22, 23, 24, 25...
Two things happened. First of all, we had Brexit, we had COVID, right?
Right.
So what happened, first of all, was that migration fell to its lowest level for 40 years. Okay? My first full year as Prime Minister, 2020, we had net migration into this country.
Nobody was moving anywhere because it was COVID.
Correct. Was the lowest for 40 years. If not, I think lowest...
That wasn't policy. That was a pandemic.
And so what happened the following year was we had an increase. What we then had was the ability, because of Brexit, to reduce that to 0 if you want. And because, thanks to what we did, you asked the decision, you say, talk about the decisions I took. The most important decision I took, and the most difficult to deliver in the House of Commons, most of whose members voted against leaving the EU, the most important thing was to go for a so-called hard Brexit. Remember this?
I do.
And a hard Brexit meant that we came out of the single market, we came out of the customs union, and we were no longer party to EU arrangements on movement of people. And that was not something that was easy, because it was something that a lot of people thought would be very, very tricky for the economy, but it was essential to deliver Brexit. And it's a result of that control that we in this country, Labour government, any government, can now decide who comes in.
And it was a result
and they
of
can,
that.
and not only that,
And
but,
it was a result
and not only
of
that, but we can decide.
We climbed to net migration of over
No,
900,000 people.
So, as I've tried to explain to you, we had very, very low migration one year. We then had more. We then after
we didn't have
left,
net migration of 900,000 people before COVID. This was a consequence of your decision. No, you don't have to be embarrassed about it. I'm just saying.
Actually, what happened was, if you talked to Kevin Foster, the former immigration minister, we took steps to change those rules so as to make it tougher for people to get in. But I just remind you what actually was happening at the time. People were saying, and nice, well-meaning liberal people were saying, Brexit is going to turn us into a leper colony, and people are going to flee the UK. And I actually think that sort of rhetoric was taken seriously by Whitehall. You have a lot of good, nice Remain civil servants. And I think that they thought that we did need to get people in to do social care and to do things like that. And but as soon as we realised the numbers, we used our powers, our legal powers, to turn it off. And if I had a complaint, it was after I'd left office. That wasn't done fast enough. You've also got to ask yourself, when you look at immigration into this country, and I'm in favour of control, right? I'm not actually anti-immigrants. I think I'm lucky that my own family was allowed to immigrate to this country, or parts of my family were allowed to immigrate years ago. But I think what people want to see is full, legal, democratic accountability, and that's what they have now. That is what they have now got. And they didn't. And so when Andy Burnham says he wants to go closer to the European Union or whatever sort of income, whatever he's saying now, when he says he wants to have a new relationship or a reset, what they want is a return to free movement. They'll start with students and all that nonsense, and then it'll become absolutely unstoppable. And what the Remainers or the Rejoiners.
I know. Okay. I don't want to relitigate the past. I want to talk about things for which you were responsible. Look,
sadly, that's all in the past.
No, no. We are living with the consequences of the past. You're a historian. You know this. You know how this works. The point I really just want to ask is this. It's a kind of it is a serious point, really. You do have a view about immigration. You have said in the past you think, broadly speaking, it's a good thing. It's got to be controlled.
Well,
There's got to be controlled.
I used to run this city, right? I know for 8 years, 8 glorious years.
I know that. Let me ask you a question.
In that period,
let me ask you a question before you.
The statistic I used to cite was that 40% of our population was born abroad, right?
Yeah.
And in that respect, London is identical. So all these raving in America about civilizational erasure, Britain's going down the tubes.
Are we talking about J.D. Vance?
Well, whoever, but all this bollocks. The population of New York that was born abroad is virtually identical. I think in America, about 30% of people are either first or 30% of the population of America is first or second generation immigrant, and we have to listen to this stuff about civilizational erasure.
I have to move on.
And break. I think there are problems.
I'm trying to get to ask you a question. And the question I want to ask you is this. No, don't tell me. Answer this question.
Okay, sure.
Are you at all embarrassed by the way that Reform and others are using the term Boris wave? Because it is true that net migration, for better or worse, has been higher as a consequence of decisions you took than at any time in our history.
I think it would be I've just pointed out that because of Brexit, we have the power to control migration, and if necessary, to have zero migration. And not only to have zero, but we have the power under Brexit. Under Brexit, which I secured and which those people didn't. They didn't even exist. They did not have a single MP, those people, right? They didn't do a beam. They did not do a beam to get Brexit through the House of Commons. Not a beam. And they swank around claiming to have been responsible for it. They did nothing to deliver Brexit, the hard Brexit, through the House of Commons, which enables this country not only to have as few people as we want overall, but also under our laws to decide who comes from where. Now, the problem with
No.
The problem with migration is not...
I need to move you on, because at the moment they're going to throw us out of the studio.
That's OK. I'm just going to finish this point. The problem... Look, as I told you, Trevor, I'm a generous-minded sort of guy. I'm not going to discriminate against people because of where they come from. What I do think they need to do is be British. And you've written... I've read good pieces by you on this, and you're right. I think that over decades, we've been far too limp-wristed in insisting that people conform to our ideals, norms of our society.
Give me an example of what you
Well, I think things like this. I think a lot of the stuff that people have been hearing about. I think a lot of the, relations between the sexes. We should have
treatment of women.
Yeah, the grooming gangs, all this sort of stuff. We haven't been tough enough in insisting on basic British norms of behaviour. And I think if you come to this country, and I used to have these wonderful ceremonies in City Hall, people would cry from all over the, backgrounds all over the world. They would be photographed with Her Majesty, Her late Majesty the Queen. And it was the most magical moment in their lives. And they swore, and they passed quite a difficult test about British culture and so on.
The UK
we need to be tougher on that. And I think that a lot of political correctness has prevented that.
What would you do with people who you think, people use the word integration, let's use that for the sake of convenience here, who are not playing by the rules, who are not doing what you've just talked about? What would you do with them?
I would shame them. I would make it clear that their behaviour. So look,
would you expel them from the country?
Well, that's hard to do if they have legal rights to live here. But I think it is totally unacceptable that you should have populations of women who don't speak English. That's absolutely appalling. All right. And things have been actually, in some ways, things have been improving. But I think, in terms of cultural norms, here when my Turkish great-grandfather came to Wimbledon, he was assassinated shortly thereafter, but never mind. When he came to Wimbledon, he decided that his progeny should be British. He wasn't assassinated in this country. And whatever you may say, whatever complaints you may make about my family, we've made a pretty good effort to speak English.
There's going to be a new Prime Minister on Monday. Says he wants to do things differently. He says that politics hasn't served the people. And some of the language he's using echoes your levelling up agenda. What do you think that the first thing he needs to do is?
Well, look, I wish him well as a new Prime Minister. I think we've had quite a lot now, and it's just like the population's doom scroll through Prime Ministers.
We've had 10 Prime Ministers.
Yeah, I think
in the last since.
But he hasn't got much time, I would say, and he needs to get on, and he needs to give investors in this country a sense of hope about it, and that means he needs to find reasons to buy British, buy Britain, get stuck in. And he needs to stop the hemorrhage of talent. And he needs to think about what he's doing on tax. And Labour needs to get a grip on spending.
I want to ask you a couple of things, if you like, as an elder statesperson in politics. You and your family now live with extensive security.
Statesperson.
We're speaking in the shadow of the murder of Anne Widdecombe.
You say statesperson normally. And I'm not against the word. Are we states?
Let's not quibble about language. We've already spent too long on this. We're speaking in the shadow of the murder of Anne Widdecombe. Nigel Farage reports hundreds of death threats. Do you think that there's a danger that public office is now so dangerous that it rules out many people who would otherwise be outstanding public servants, but who don't want to put their families or themselves at risk?
I really hope that isn't true. I think that it probably isn't true, because I think that the risks, although they obviously exist, remain very, very, very low. What I think is true is that probably in my lifetime, in my political sort of career, it has become more rebarbative, right? I think people are more verbally aggressive with each other. Don't you feel? I feel it's got a bit coarser, a bit rougher, and that might put people off, and they might not want their kids shouted at, that sort of thing, right? And so what I think about all this is that actually it's probably expensive and pointless to try and raise everybody's level of security. But what we could do is dial down the general level of invective. Well, and sort of, you know, am I onto something? I'm
sure people could be more...
I tell you who I thought.
Okay.
I thought, you know, I think she's been an appalling chancellor, but I thought Rachel Reeves was very good at that petrol station when she stood up to someone. Maybe you disagree.
And somebody shouted at her.
I thought she was great. I thought she was great. And I think that you know, you've got to take it in your stride.
There's another angle to this, which I've got to put to you, really. Some people would say that you bear some responsibility for the coarsening of politics, or the decline in the reputation of politics.
Have I ever abused anybody? What do you mean?
Let me finish my question. Let me finish my question before you ask yourself the question. Parties at number 10. Suspicious dealings over PPE. Failure to clamp down on disreputable behaviour and backbenchers. Some people would say a lot of this is Johnson.
Bollocks. No, I don't believe anybody would say that in their right mind. You know what I think about the
I could bring you pages and pages of it.
Yeah, because you know, people write any old nonsense. But you know what I think about the so-called Partygate nonsense. It was nonsense. As for PPE, I mean, actually, I think I'm right in saying that the COVID inquiry, Dame Heather Hallett has just produced a finding. I mean, I might be wrong, saying that there was no cronyism or whatever.
What she says, you could not find any evidence of it.
Well, I don't think, nor could I.
But she also said, by the way, there shouldn't have been a VIP lane. I don't want to get into the detail, but my point is...
But are you sorry?
I'm just asking you a straightforward question. You don't feel any responsibility for any of that?
No, but I think I'm a very mild-mannered guy, and I don't think that I'm...
all right.
You know, I think, generally speaking, I think that what happens in these situations is that the left blame the right and the right blame the left. And everyone says, if the right-wingers weren't so awful, then none of this would happen. If the left and the right-wingers say, well, if the left-wingers weren't so nasty, then, you know, everybody just needs to take a chill pill, I think.
I just want to say one.
I remember when things were... I mean, you know, what I would say is that, and I think this would be fair, I think that referendums, and particularly a referendum on an issue of identity, as it turned out to be, which was the Brexit referendum, I think that did cause much more rancour than people thought it would. And that was a sad thing.
Do you feel sorry about that?
Well, I didn't call the referendum. I mean, I took part in it. But yeah, I think I do feel sorry about it. And I've said I said it on some BBC show. I don't know if they used it. I think it was regrettable that it became so... I think it was because the issues were so sort of abstruse, and the constitutional issues, that sometimes people found it easier just to get involved in the personal argy-bargy.
The Conservative Party is not contesting, unusually, a by-election, the one in Clacton in August. If you agree with that decision, who do you actually want to win that? Farage or Binface?
I think it would be... I think it would be a very bad idea for me to blight any candidate with my support. To say, I think that you know, obviously I don't agree with what Reform are saying about a lot of things. I think the trouble is that I don't see their programme for the country. I don't see their programme for the economy. I don't see the need for this by-election, to be perfectly honest.
So you wouldn't be an honest broker, by the way, between the Conservative Party and Reform Party?
I think that it's been a very peculiar by-election, and it shouldn't be happening. And you know, I thought Binface had rather a good point when he said that, you know, all I would say is this: I thought Binface had a decent point, the Count Binface, when he said that a vote for him would actually preclude a second the expense of a second by-election. So, I just put it out there.
May I ask
that's a reasonable
one quick
point.
question on this? There are some people in the Conservative Party who think that there should be a deal between the Tories and Reform, whether or not.
Not me.
And actually, there might be a broker who's credible with both parties who could do that. No deal would be better than a bad deal.
No Conservative leader can possibly engage in talks about a deal, because you're not going to do any good for your own party. You're not going to boost Tory chances by going around talking about some sort of surgical cosmetic enhancement of your own party by creating some Franken party of the right. That is not going to work. That is not going to work. And actually, if you look at what's happening, Kemi Badenoch is coming back very, very strongly, coming through very strongly now.
7 of the last 10 prime ministers have essentially been turfed out of office.
All political careers.
Not all. I know the Powell thing, but not all of them have. Some have lost elections. Now, you and Starmer both led your parties to big victories, and then they got rid of you. It must be impossible not to feel at least a little bitter about that. So what advice would you give to Keir Starmer to deal with that bitterness?
Well, I'd give the same advice that the late Majesty, the Queen, gave me, which was there's absolutely no point in bitterness ever about these things. And it's a very good piece of advice.
Is that what she said?
Really? Yes, she was. I think I've said that before.
I haven't heard it, but she said that to you after.
I don't think I'm betraying any particular confidence, but she said that. Yeah, she did, and I mean, you can see why, from the monarch's point of view, that's the right thing for the country. You don't want politicians feuding endlessly with other politicians once they've left office, but it's also the right thing personally for your own spiritual health and growth.
So that's a rather touching sentiment.
Well, I think she's totally right. I mean, I think, don't we all know it? I mean, so I'm sure, look, I think I did feel a bit sorry for Keir sometimes. And, sometimes I couldn't quite understand why he was so unbelievably unpopular. I mean, I could see he was doing a lot of terrible things, but I couldn't, when I talked to him, I couldn't see, personally, he didn't strike me as being a bad guy, really. I mean, he's totally misguided. He's a hopeless lefty lawyer. He does lots of terrible things. He was, a human bollard and all the rest of it.
He didn't say he felt that way when they got rid of you.
No, that's true. But but it was his job to get rid of me. Or his job to play it. But
when we say get rid of you, last point really. When you stepped down as Prime Minister 4 years ago, I looked up what you said, and you said you were like one of those booster rockets that has fulfilled his function. I will now be gently re-entering the atmosphere, and like Cincinnatus, I am returning to my plough. Now, these days, let me finish. These days, Elon Musk is reusing his rockets, and as you and I both know, Cincinnatus took his hand off the plough to come back. Not once, but probably twice, to lead the Republic. When are you going to come back?
No, honestly, Trevor, I think that I've had a very, very lucky time in politics. I got on, in spite of what you may say and what people may think, I got a huge amount done in 3 years as PM. I had a wonderful time as Mayor of London. I even quite enjoyed being Foreign Secretary. That was, I was mainly being sent abroad all the time. I think you can't step in, as Heraclitus said, you can't step in the same river twice. I think it was Heraclitus, I can't remember who it was. It was. And so I think that Kemi is doing very well. She really is. And she's got zap, she's got energy, she's getting better and better. People are waking up to this. And I think, I got plenty. I mean, I've got a lot of fish to fry.
And we'll have at least a couple of years of Andy Burnham. Do you expect him to succeed?
I expect him to succeed Keir Starmer, yes.
No. To do well.
That seems almost impossible to stop. That's as far as I'll go.
Boris Johnson, thank you very much.
Not at all.
It's almost impossible to make any sense of that. Anyway, a couple of things on that interview. I said that 10 prime ministers since Brexit. I actually meant 7 over the last 10 years. And by the way, Heraclitus did not say, don't step into the river twice. What he said was that if you do step in twice, remember that the second time it will be a different river because time and water have flowed past. So in typical Boris Johnson fashion, he implied one thing, I won't be back, what quite possibly meant precisely the opposite. That documentary mentioned, by the way, is called Boris Johnson into Ukraine's Kill Zone, and it's available on 5 from 9 p.m. this coming Friday. I also need to tell you that the by-election in Clacton was mentioned, so on your screens now, you can see the full list of candidates standing next month, not just Binface and what's his name? Farage. Thank you so much. Let's see what our panel made of all that. We're joined all morning by the Labour peer and former Ed Miliband advisor, Baroness Ayesha Hazarika, the former chair of the Football Association and the BBC, Director General, Greg Dyke, and the chief political commentator for the Eye, Kitty Donaldson. Well, there's all sorts of things one could take out of that. Should we just start with, actually, perhaps the most substantial thing, Ukraine? What did you make of what he had to say about Ukraine, Greg?
Well, I thought overall it wasn't me, Gov. You know, I didn't do all that. It was someone else. Everything I did was good, which is unusual, I think. You know, after 3.5 years, you'd have thought he'd have said, yeah, I'm not sure about this, or that was great. But there was no sign of that I saw at all. Ukraine, well, I think the fear about Ukraine is, of course, is the moment Putin really thinks he's going to leave, it gets much worse. Going to lose, sorry. It get much worse. And I think his idea that you've got to, you know, we're here in the first place because Ukraine was going to, they wanted Ukraine to join the EU and NATO at some stage, and Putin wasn't going to have that. I don't know. I don't know whether, I certainly can't see Donald Trump going along with what he was saying there. So I think it's pretty irrelevant to what's going to happen.
Ayesha?
Well, I just sort of think, just taking a step back, it was sort of like, we're in the run-up to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. That was like a rambling one-man show preview. It really, come therapy session, it really, really was. And I just feel that, I feel he's so delusional, particularly about immigration. I thought that, for me, was the big takeaway. You rightly said that the numbers have gone up. He was having absolutely none of it. The fact he was trying to sort of blame everybody else for this. I mean, it's like the guy who kind of sets fire to your house, then criticising your choice of fire alarm. You know, it's just like, it's sort of delusional. And I think as well, what would be really nice to hear from somebody like him, who was such a big part of the architect of the Brexit project, is to just say, look, I still stand by why I supported it, but it hasn't quite gone the way, you know, we thought it was going to go. I mean, this idea that he is somehow the victim of Brexit, Brexiteers are the victim of this terrible thing that has been done to them, it's all the fault of the civil servants. The reality is we're poorer, we're more divided, it's more difficult to govern this country, we're more politically unstable, and that is the reality of where we are.
To be fair, he did say give it time.
How much time? How much more time do we need? But on Ukraine, look, you know, to be fair to him, he was good on Ukraine. He was strong on Ukraine. He set the tone, which subsequent prime ministers have followed. And let's hope that Andy Burnham does that. I'm sure he will. But remember, we are one part of the story, along with other European allies. But what America does is absolutely critical to Ukraine.
Kitty?
Actually, that was the point I was going to make. I thought that was interesting, the bit that Boris Johnson said about relying on Donald Trump to perhaps come in and sort this out. I get the impression that Iran, because in the run-up to the midterms, that actually the patience that the Americans have got with foreign wars is running out, actually, particularly when their oil prices are spiking the way they are. and that actually any political capital Trump has is fast diminishing, and whether Ukraine sort of falls by the wayside is an open question for the latter half of this year. And separately, I've been thinking about this weekend, is Andy Burnham's approach to Donald Trump, actually, and the difference we're going to see with Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer came under a lot of criticism for sort of being slightly obsequious to Trump, and although at the time we all thought, actually, you know, digging that letter out of his pocket from the King and giving it to Trump and inviting him to the state dinner was probably quite a clever thing to do. But there's been a shift in how European leaders see Trump. Giorgia Meloni, for instance, in Italy, being very anti-Trump these days. Andy Burnham signalling, and I think it was his you know, hard-hitting interview with Gary Lineker the other day. You know, more of the
Why the eye roll, Kitty? I mean, why have you had to choose to be interviewed by somebody? Why not Gary Lineker?
Why not? And Trevor, when you speak to him, I hope you ask him about crisps, right? But like, but he was indicating to Gary Lineker that his attitude to Trump would be different, and actually, if you accept Boris Johnson's argument that that Trump is the key to unlocking this, actually, you are going to have to play Trump at his own game, and therefore, I think being a bit standoffish with Trump, we don't know. Perhaps Andy Burnham will just be kind of polite in a sort of factual way, but I think that is going to be the fascinating kind of first meeting when we see, you know, the sort of northern sort of down-to-earthness versus the sort of great orange monster.
One of the things, domestically, one of the things that struck me and surprised me a little bit was that he was so adamant about there being no deal with reform. If you look at the numbers, you can see why that would make some sense. And Boris Johnson probably is one of the few figures who has credibility in both parties. Why not?
But all Conservatives are going to say that until they do the deal, aren't they? I mean, if you get to, you know, if you have a general election where a Conservative plus reform, or reform plus Conservative is the majority, they'll do a deal.
I think that's absolutely right. I spoke to a very senior Conservative who was really slagging off reform and saying how dreadful they all were, very cross with people like Robert Jenrick who had defected. And I said, right, do you think there's any deal to be done before the election? Absolutely not. I said afterwards, if it was a bit of a hung parliament and they did need Conservative ministers to join the cabinet, would you do it in a heartbeat? So, you know, I think that's the calculation. But also remember, there was an informal deal done back in 2019. Lots of Brexit Party candidates stepped aside, and that very much helped Boris Johnson get that landslide in 2019. So I think there's a little bit of revisionism going on.
Well, of course, the reason that this matters, of course, is that Andy Burnham is going to make a calculation about what might happen in the future. And if he thinks that this scenario is plausible, he'll go one way rather than another way. Don't you think, Kitty?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I don't think it's just on the right we're looking at a possible coalition. I think if he does go to the country and say there's a poll bounce, which there probably will be, say there's a poll bounce that he makes him think, actually, now's the time and then I'll have my own mandate, etc. I don't think they're in that space yet, by the way. But what do you do on the left? All the polls at the moment show that Andy Burnham can't win an outright majority unless there's a huge poll bounce. So what does he do? Does he go to Ed Davey and say, you know, behind the scenes, twist my arm and we'll jump into bed together, and at the next election I'll have a customs union in our manifesto or something, or, you know, more House of Lords reform or whatever the Libs
Social care.
Well, except that the social care, I think, to be fair to Andy Burnham, he's very keen to do anyway, actually. Yeah. Actually, on social care, I think bringing reform and the Tories in is probably the bigger ask, because you've got, I mean, of all the kind of, you know, intractable problems in British politics, social care, you've got to have cross-party consensus, because we'll have what happened under Boris. I mean, Boris put up, was it national insurance by
2p?
2p, yes. And then Rishi Sunak came along 6 months later and undid it, you know, because you've got to have, whatever people decide, you've got to decide and stick to it.
Oh, you've also got to remember, I mean, Andy Burnham is a supporter of proportional representation. Now, that can't be, there's no chance of that for the next election, I wouldn't have thought, but I would have thought that must be the long-term goal, and it's been, I always say, go back to 1951, 97% voted Labour or Tory. Today, you're lucky to get 50% vote Labour or Tory.
The other thing which struck me about what he said was really coming toward the end of the interview, talking about, if you like, the mood of politics. And he didn't have to say it, but I thought it was generous of him to reflect on Keir Starmer in the way he did. And he said he couldn't himself understand why Keir Starmer was so unpopular. Ayesha, any hope of a sort of kinder, gentler politics coming down the road? The next Prime Minister talked about doing politics differently, being more open to others and not, what's the expression you use? Problem solving, not finger pointing. Are we entering nirvana?
Look, I really hope that we can try and work in a slightly more collaborative way. I'm not naive, though. Politics is essentially like pretty much a blood sport. It is very, very tribal. But I do feel that there are so many issues that actually behind the scenes there probably is more consensus than people would think. And behind the scenes in politics, Kitty will know this, I know this as a member of the House of Lords as well, there's actually a lot of really productive cross-party working that goes on, particularly in the House of Lords. I'd like to see more of that. So I hope, and I'm not being naive and I don't want to be all kumbaya about it, but I do hope, let's take social care, for example. That is something we all agree, whatever our political background, that is a shocking problem that we have not solved, a deep structural problem. How we treat our older people is really a measure of what kind of society and our vulnerable people. So I really hope, I would like to see as one of his first acts, an open invitation to all party leaders saying, let's get in a room, let's try and get some movement on social care.
All right, we've been talking about the past to some extent. Next, about the future. We'll hear from the Deputy Labour leader, Lucy Powell.
First Minister, how are you?
Good morning. Good morning.
Nice to see you. How are you feeling?
Looking forward to getting into the parliamentary chamber.
Are you any further forward to making a decision?
No, it's an important day today.
All of the claims were in line with my parliamentary duties, so I'm making that clear to you, Conor.
He was a Scot through and through.
He was a very good politician.
Alex Salmond was controversial, he was a disruptor, but above all, he was respected.
Will you resign if you lose this week?
Again, I'm not planning to, of course, lose the vote of no confidence. I'm planning to win that vote of no confidence.
His face said it all.
My intention to stand down as party leader.
This is now a storm with deadly consequences. How are they feeling?
They're a bit scared at the minute.
We've been told to evacuate.
How are you feeling?
Devastated.
Hundreds of homes were wiped out by flooding. I'm Conor Gillis, Sky's Scotland correspondent.
It was probably the darkest time in my life.
Scott is 5 years sober after a cocaine addiction left him close to death.
Scotland has a shameful record. Worse than England, the worst in Europe.
Why not just say you failed? Because then you might get more respect from families who've lost loved ones.
This is where one of the UK's most prolific rapists thought he'd got away with murder.
Sky News can reveal that former sex workers had told police he was sexually violent.
My Emma.
Free wherever you get your news.
It's over, isn't it?
The Americans say he is Rossi, a fraudster.
This has been one of the most bizarre cases ever heard in a courtroom in this country.
A dangerous murderer.
Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive Andrew Ennis after this?
She said she can forgive him, but as long as he's behind bars.
By doing the right thing, it's destroyed your life.
They terrorised me. They intimidated me.
I'm so grateful.
Sky News, the full story first.
Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides and it's moving this way.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
being a Sky News journalist?
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party.
I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
A historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Well, as we've been saying, tomorrow the United Kingdom gets a new Prime Minister. We still don't know who will be in his cabinet or really what his government will do. Well, we tried to find out a bit more from his deputy Labour leader, Lucy Powell. Lucy Powell, can I get clear about one thing? Am I interviewing the next Deputy Prime Minister this morning?
You're interviewing the deputy leader of the Labour Party, Trevor. I was elected deputy leader directly by members of the Labour Party 10 months ago. It's a job I will still have tomorrow, next week, hopefully in a year or two's time as well. So I've got the job security that I'm really happy with, thank you.
Yeah, but, you know, you could be double jobbing. And let me put it this way. Are we expected genuinely to believe that you have no idea if you're going to have a job in the cabinet?
Well, look, I mean, we'll wait to see all of that tomorrow. I think Andy's been really clear that he's going to appoint his cabinet tomorrow, probably afternoon, once he becomes Prime Minister. And that's absolutely right. You know, he's not Prime Minister yet. And you don't start appointing a government and a cabinet until you're actually Prime Minister. But I've been really clear that my job as the directly elected deputy leader of the Labour Party, the mandate that I was given, the manifesto, if you like, that I stood on, I promised Labour Party members that I would be their voice at the top of the Labour Party in government as well, across the government. And I would make sure that I would advocate for them and the communities that the Labour Party is there to serve. So I will continue to do that in whatever way is most effective, but I will continue to be the deputy leader. And I think what we've seen in the last 2 or 3 weeks now through this leadership campaign is Andy setting out his stall for how he will be Prime Minister. And then, you know, he appoints a government that helps him deliver that. All right, well, look, let's come to that. I mean, you know, cynics would say, gosh, she does know, but she's not telling him. But I believe everything. It's reported that Andy Burnham wants to cancel the proposal for digital IDs and repurpose the money. Is that true? Yes, his team have put that out overnight, to be clear about that. He wants to refocus and reprioritise the government's resources, the government's attention onto his priorities of tackling the cost of living, really rewiring the way the country and the economy work so that people have more agency over their lives and also can get some breathing space and really bear down on the cost of living. So this is an example of refocusing and reprioritising and the change that he will bring. Well, it's a pretty small step, isn't it? I mean, the OBR, when this was put forward by this Starmer administration, said that it would cost £1.8 billion over 2 years to bring in this system. In fact, the previous government said, oh, it wouldn't cost anything like that. So you're not even saving, you know, 2 billion quid, which isn't going to make a dent
on the black hole you've got, for example, on the defence budget of $5 billion, and it won't do anything on cost of living. I mean, it's pretty small beer, isn't it?
Well, I don't think there's any suggestion that this is the only thing. I think, look, the digital ID card scheme, which actually wasn't in our manifesto, was very controversial when it was announced a year ago by the then Prime Minister Keir Starmer, and it does take a lot of attention and resource of government away from those priorities. That I think what Andy's been clear about. This is a chance to refresh, to renew, to reset the government, to have make sure that we've got a clearer sense of those key priorities and that everyone's working towards those, rather than being distracted by a myriad of differing policies that do take attention and resources away.
Yeah, but I suppose I'm asking you about scale, and this is what's got the Chancellor, whoever that is, I'm assuming it's not you, is it? Pause for you. OK, fine, you're not going to tell me that. It's going to be one for the Chancellor. And I suppose the question here is, does the next Prime Minister understand the scale of the problem that he faces? Because if this is, if you like, a first big announcement, it really doesn't feel like it meets the scale of the challenge that he himself has set out, which is to fix the last 40 years.
Well, he has set out, I think, a really ambitious and bold vision about how he wants to rewire the country. He understands what it feels like for ordinary people right round the country who feel they have little agency over their lives, little agency over the cost of living and the bills they have to pay and keep going up, and the fact that living standards have fallen. And he set out what I think is a very bold and ambitious plan about redistributing power, but also about taking more control over those essentials in life, so that they're not just being run in the interests of shareholders and private interests, but that they can be run in the interests of ordinary people.
We do understand scale of the nature of the problem, I beg your pardon, and you've just given the description again. But this first signal of what you're going to do as a government, my point is it seems rather small against that description. I mean, let me just take up.
There's no one magic bullet here, Trevor. There's no one thing that we can do that would magically redress all of that and change that. This is a project and a mission over time, reorienting the focus and the priority of the Labour government on the foundations that have been laid over the last 2 years on the basis of our 2024 manifesto, but refocusing and reprioritising the government to these bigger, bolder outcomes and missions, and that is something that we will aim to deliver, and Andy's government, I'm sure, will want to deliver over time, and there'll be many, many things about that and underneath that.
Well, let's take a just very concrete example. You mentioned the essentials of life. I mean, there's nothing more essential than water. Are you going to nationalise Thames Water?
Well, look, let's see. There's lots of speculation around. I mean, this has been an ongoing issue and concern in government and around for many months now. The government has powers to bring a distressed water company under special measures, let's see if the government wants to use those powers. We also have actually promised to bring forward a new piece of legislation around water reform as well. So there's real opportunity there to look at how we can ensure we've got a sustainable water system in this country. Because let's be honest, I think this is something that we can all see. The privatisation of water hasn't worked. It's not created competition. What we've seen is bills going up and up and up over years and years and years, investment not being made into the
so you're open
of
to
water.
so you're open
and then
to,
now these companies are in real distress.
So you're open to reversal of that privatisation at a bill knocking on what, $2 billion a year?
Look, there are many different
Thames Water alone.
ways there are many different ways of doing this and different models available. But the government actually has the powers already. That's been a long-standing powers as a backstop. I think that's where people feel these deep sense of unfairness sometimes. It's the taxpayer and the state that is usually the backstop and the last line of defence, if you like, that has to pick up the pieces when the private company isn't successful. So the profits are taken into the private hands, and all the insurance, if you like, and all the costs are borne ultimately by the state and the taxpayer. And that's not right, and that's not sustainable, and it's not led to what we wanted it to, what we needed it to lead to, which was a good water system in this country that wasn't polluting rivers and seas, that had invested in its sewer system and its water supply with costs that consumers could afford.
You've gone through that before. Let me just ask you a wider question based on what Mr. Burnham said on Friday. He said that his election as Labour leader, and he called it "This Change Today," is the most significant change moment in our politics for 40 years. Really? More significant than the fall of Margaret Thatcher, election of Tony Blair, 2000 financial crisis, the decision to leave the EU. I mean, isn't it a bit hyperbolic, a bit overstated?
Well, look, they're Andy's words. I think what he's talking about there is an agenda, a willingness to really take head on some of these, the orthodoxy about the way in which the country and the economy has been run. And some of those orthodoxies have been there for 40 years. Hoarding of an over-centralised power. An over-centralised power in Whitehall.
I understand
much more centralised than any other country, equivalent country.
The question is whether, in what he has said, what we know, and we don't know very much about what he wants to do, but what he has said, the question is, does he really understand what he's getting himself into? Or is this, as you would say in Manchester, a bit all mouth and trousers?
We're definitely not all mouth and no trousers here. But look, I think Andy absolutely knows what he's getting himself into. He's been a senior elected politician in this country for 25 years. He's seen it from both ends. He's seen it from a national government end. He's seen it from a city region end and trying to get things done. He's been incredibly successful in doing that in the last 10 years here in Greater Manchester, and his record speaks for itself. I can assure you that he's absolutely ready for the challenge that he faces. He doesn't underestimate that challenge by any means at all, but I think what people have been crying out for is someone showing a direction, a hopeful new direction to a different kind of country that works in the interests of ordinary working people again, and not in the interests of the vested interest or private interest all the time. And that is the agenda that he's set out. And I think it's a one that everyone can get behind.
To get to that point, he's got to deal, if you like, with the legacy of those who came before him. We've been talking to the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, and I think you would accept, as pretty much everybody does, that you're going to have to deal with the consequences of Brexit, of the Johnson policies on migration, and also his stance on Ukraine. Johnson said to us that Burnham should call for NATO to admit Ukraine now and call Mr. Putin's bluff. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think, Andy Burnham, like Keir Starmer before, and indeed Boris Johnson, have been absolutely clear about this country's steadfast commitment to Ukraine. We stand alongside
and shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine. And I think it's no coincidence, is it, that actually one of the last visits that Boris Johnson did as Prime Minister was to Ukraine, and one of the last visits that Keir Starmer did as Prime Minister was also to Ukraine. I am very, very confident, I know, that Andy wants to continue that strength of leadership, that partnership, and being absolutely clear of our commitment, our unwavering commitment and support of Ukraine in the war that they face.
Aside from Ukraine, Mr Johnson also said something to us about MP safety, and he argues that it would be expensive and pointless to try to raise every MP's level of security. And instead, what we should try to do is dial down the temperature of politics, reduce the level of invective. You were leader of the House for quite some time. Do you think he's got a point here?
I absolutely, completely agree with that point, and actually said the same myself in the House last week in relation to Anne Widdecombe's brutal murder, that we can't sort of security weigh our way out of this by just putting bigger and bigger walls around members of Parliament and the way they go about their business. I don't want that. You know, a big part of my job, our job, is to be in touch, constant touch with our constituents and our communities, and we don't want to lock ourselves away from that. But we have to deal with the threat. And the threat comes from this increasingly polarised, increasingly personalised, sometimes quite toxic debate in this country, which is absolutely amplified and made worse in many cases on social media and the way in which social media operates. Right. And we do need to dial that down. We need to disagree agreeably once again, if that is possible, and respect the fact that we do have differing views from each other, but we can do that respectfully.
Lucy Powell, thank you. And by the way, I'm just loving the birds behind you there that have been participating in our interview.
I know. I always get more comments about the birds in the garden than anything I say on these interviews, Trevor. You'll be pleased to know.
Not on our show. Thank you, Lucy Powell.
Thank you.
Well, let's go back to our panel, Greg, Ayesha and Kitty, and we are not going to talk about birds, we're going to talk about what she actually said. Actually, in fact, before we get to that, Kitty, the Burnham team's adopted what they say is a different way of doing things, not briefing. We don't know anything. Is this working for them?
Not from my point of view. It's quite hard to do my job, actually. But I can see why we've had this sort of slightly weird interregnum. It would have looked a little bit presumptuous, I think, if, you know, someone who's yet to go to the palace, yet to kiss hands with the king, starts briefing out who their chancellor, their home secretary will be. Having said that, we are getting hints and indications from people close to the team. But I understand that at least the senior members of the cabinet are very much locked in.
Oh, name names.
Well, as I wrote last week that I think Shabana Mahmood will be made Chancellor of the Exchequer. I'm being told Lucy Powell will get something senior in cabinet, as well as the deputy leader of the Labour Party. Louise Haigh, who is very close to Andy Burnham, ran his campaign up in Makerfield, will get Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, in a kind of beefed up role. And that's very sort of, it sounds a bit sort of like someone who, you know, with the sword and tights, but actually it's a very powerful role, knocking heads together across Whitehall, bringing bits of the arm of the state together to enact what Burnhamism is. And
it's interesting. All prime ministers have a sort of enforcer, don't they?
Yeah.
Blair had Prescott, Theresa May, I think David Lidington. Yeah. There are people who basically we didn't see that much of, but they handled the cabinet.
Yeah, and we'll start getting those proper names tomorrow afternoon. I mean, there's a sort of odd debate going on about, you know, how powerful are these people in and of themselves? I mean, back in the kind of 70s, 80s, people would be cabinet, you know, they'd be a cabinet minister because of their standing in the party, because of their wealth of experience outside Parliament and so forth. Is Andy Burnham now so powerful that he can basically go in and say, right, you know, Trevor, you can be Minister for Paperclips because even though, exactly, because even though you've done all this work already. I am at my most powerful, and therefore I will impose my view of what the cabinet should be, because he's got to bring in all sorts of people from around the different wings of the party and so forth. And therefore, are we going to end up with tomorrow being the first test of how unpopular he can make himself?
OK, Andy, I'm really, really good on the paper. Ayesha, assuming that you haven't had the call yet, what are you making of it? Perhaps not so much about the names, but just about the way they're trying to do this. Is it really different, or is it just the circumstances?
Well, I think the first thing I'd say is that I really push back against some of the commentary saying, oh, he's not really he doesn't really understand politics. He's been out of Westminster for a long time. This is a guy that's just pulled off the most spectacular political coup in recent British political history. The idea that this guy doesn't understand how politics works, or who doesn't understand how the Labour... I mean, do me a favour. And he was, as Lucy Powell said, he was elected 25 years ago. In many ways, he's probably had more preparation than any incoming Prime Minister. I do think it's very telling that nothing has massively leaked in terms of his top team. And I think that's quite a contrast to the administration we saw before, where everything leaked all the time. In fact, I remember when Keir Starmer came into government, quite a lot of bad blood was formulated at the beginning when long-standing shadow ministers found out they were not getting their job because it was announced in the press by very good journalists like Kitty and things like that. So I think they are going about this the right way. And I think the culture change, not just in terms of Westminster, but within the party, is really important. Now, whether they will be able to pull that off, because I reckon right now, everyone's Andy's best pal. Everyone is Andy's close personal showbiz friend. Let's see where things are on Thursday when the final list of junior ministers come out and the envoys and the unpaid envoys, and your name is not on that list, right? So let's see where things are. And the final thing I just want to say is this. Look, I was looking back. In fact, just in my notebook, I had notes from Keir Starmer's first ever King's Speech. And in that, the rhetoric is, we're going to cut the cost of living, we're going to have a mission-led government, and we're going to return politics to the service of working people. So there are all these grand statements at the start now. Andy will be judged in the same way that all prime ministers are, not on the rhetoric of where they start, but on the reality of what they actually deliver.
Greg, are you feeling that this is going to be different? Because there's a point of view that says, actually, thus far, we're hearing so little that we could be into Starmer 2.0 with Andy.
No, I think what they've done so far is quite clever. I mean, journalists obviously want to know more, and they're desperate to know who's going to get this job and who's going to get that job. And he quite rightly said, no, that will be for next Monday. And that's absolutely right. I think he's got a chance, actually. I think he's got quite a good chance. I think what we know he's talking about, devolution, more power back to regional and local authorities, well, that is long overdue. We are the most centralised nation in Europe. Go through some of the other things, changing to the whipping system. We're doing that. More public housing. I mean, the scandal in this country at the moment is if you're a kid, you're getting married, your chances of getting a house are very low. So more public housing as it was when we were younger, I think they've got a chance.
OK, let's take a break. More of this in just a moment.
Hello, it's 7 o'clock. This is the Kathy Newman Show. How long's the 5 million going to last, Mr. Farage? Let's find out. Diane, who would you put in there?
It's not for me to say. I want to see.
Not
just
yourself,
accused
not
you.
Do you ever look at yourself and think, are you the problem?
I do feel sorry for him, yeah.
We'll see what happens. Does it mean, frankly, that you are an irrelevant? Great to have this lovely couple on the sofa.
I know, what a dream team they are.
She's christened the couch.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
All alcohol products, not just wine, will have labels warning of liver disease and the link to fatal cancers.
Is it crazy? It's an industry worth around €14 billion a year. That's why Italy sees this Irish plan as such a threat.
It's always instructive and occasionally entertaining to hear what Donald Trump has to say on the issue of Brexit.
She's got her own way of doing it, that's okay.
The job takes me to every corner of this island.
The rioting stemmed from a horrific daytime stabbing attack at a primary school in the city centre.
The scale of the rioting and the destruction it caused is pretty much unprecedented here in Dublin. Jerry, any comments on the judge's decisions? Do you feel vindicated, Jerry? This is the end, the somewhat chaotic end, of a 52-day trial.
Micheál Martin could be set to head back to government with the Taoiseach Simon Harris.
Are you confident that you can now return as Taoiseach?
I'm cautiously optimistic and excited.
A mystery press conference hastily called. Leo Varadkar strode out and didn't disappoint.
I am resigning as President and Leader of Fine Gael effective today.
The people here sometimes feel they're somewhat neglected by the Irish government, to the extent that this place is sometimes known as the Forgotten County.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks, but none have ever been found.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland. Sky News, get the full story first.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Back to Greg, Ayesha and Kitty. OK, Ayesha, what's the first thing that the new Prime Minister has to do?
So I would say he's never going to be more potent as he is at the beginning. So I would tackle some of the quite difficult things first. I think growth is, trying to get some growth going in this economy is absolutely critical. So I think we need to see some kind of plan on that, particularly around energy prices and the cost of living. And he's alluded to that. I think defence spending is really, really important. Keir Starmer has actually left him a bit of a black hole on that, and he does need to find the money quickly. Remember, one of the things that really catalysed Keir Starmer's demise was John Healey resigning, and this is not some mythical future problem. This is like happening now. And I do think the issue of helping young people get back into work, I would expedite the Alan Milburn work. Alan Milburn did a really good report setting out really the diagnosis, but we now need the prescription. So I say there's some of the difficult things he's got to do. But he will also want to not make the mistake that Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves made, which is their debut was it's all doom and gloom, it's all terrible, and here's this thing called the winter fuel allowance, which was disastrous. So he'll want to do some kind of old-time Labour religion to sort of throw a bit of cheer. And I think water, I think the Thames water thing is quite a symbolic. And if, by the way, the investors want to have a fight with him, they want to take him to court, I think that's a good fight for him to have. I think he'll be happy to have that fight.
We are apparently reporting on Sky News that that's exactly what's going to happen. There's going to be a battle royal. So what do you think, Greg? What's his first priorities?
Well, first of all, I think it's an incredibly difficult time to be a politician. I mean, you're basically in a no-growth society. And that no-growth, which has now gone on for something like 15 years, has come at the same time as social media, really. And I think that makes being a politician difficult. He cuts through a lot of that, I think, and he's got a chance. But he's got to keep that personality there. He's got to not be seen. I mean, the problem with his predecessor is he quickly got seen as a rather grey man, and I think Burnham has got to be different to that. I do think there's some crisis. I mean, Thames Water is interesting because you could see government saying, OK, go bust, and we will then take it over, and we're not. Why should you have compensation? And it'll be very interesting to see that, and that will appeal to some.
Go bust, no water from me?
No, you'll be water. So it'll continue.
Okay.
It's just that I mean, the real problem with Thames Water, like so many of the water companies, is that they've all taken too much debt, and they've got so much debt that it'll never be repaid.
Kitty?
Yeah, I think we're going to see a series of symbolic stages of direction. We've had all the kind of hopey-changey stuff last week, bringing the kind of, giving the Labour Party a big cuddle. I think this week has got to be about the country. And so Thames Water, very interesting, because it does send a signal that, pumping sewage into our rivers and seas isn't unacceptable, but also more that there is a long-term strategic plan to get inflation down. And yes, it's probably going to be quite expensive, and all the legal and political battles he's going to have in the middle will be trying. But if you can get that back into public ownership, and you can bring people's bills down, and you can run a waterways that is basically works for everyone, fish included, then actually I think the public will be on board with that.
Just very quickly, we've got about 30 seconds or so. One name that hasn't been mentioned in this programme at all, Miliband. We gather David's...
Which one?
Well, exactly. We gather David's not coming here. What's he going to do with Ed?
Well, this is a kind of quite an open question. There's been a kind of battle going on behind the scenes, and this is why I'm slightly sceptical about this whole new politics thing, because there's the unions on one side. No?
No, sorry, we've got to stop. Ayesha, just quickly, do you know anything that we don't?
No, I don't, but I'm sure Ed will continue to play a very important role.
We will all know tomorrow. I'll be back next Sunday. Andy's first, my last.